Welcome to DecentMed Presents PTSD Roundtable. We had great speakers today, but I found that our three best speakers were the three speakers I'm about to bring up to the stage. The best speaker today was an unconventional speaker, but I think that he did a really good job at breaking down every element of PTSD from a modernized lens. And that's Jim Peconin, life architect and founder of Amazing Life Design. Oh, that didn't work. Jim, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Samuel. My name is Jim. I work with men who have been traumatized and who are left lost, confused, or angry. The traditional methods to heal have failed. I have a very alternative method that works, and it was such a joy today to really go through all the different ways that PTSD impacts people.
Our second best speaker today, she's a rock star. And I think that what she does really hits home today because she is a veteran. And goal of today's roundtable is to get all three of these speakers' perspective as they approach PTSD from a different lens. Jim approaches trauma for men and approaches it from the perspective of a coaching lens. The next person we want to bring to the stage is Dr. Kristen Barnes, and she approaches PTSD from an alternative method, psychedelic medicine, utilizing fascial counterstrain, and so much more. So, Dr. Barnes, you have the floor.
Yeah, hey, Dr. Kristen Barnes. I'm licensed to practice medicine in Washington State as a naturopathic doctor and an acupuncturist. But what I think I brought to the table today was the veteran perspective and how to get the most out of both the care that is offered through Veterans Affairs, the VA, through TRICARE, and through alternative medicine that might be available in your community. And I think the bottom line of what is the most helpful or the most important piece is connection, and finding the connection with other veterans in your area, connection with alternative providers that can help people heal from PTSD.
And I think she also, our last speaker in this roundtable, she did a really good job at approaching the other side of PTSD. I'll admit, when I think about PTSD, I immediately think of veterans. And our last speaker, Angela Romero, an Ayurveda practitioner and a practitioner that helps with women's health, she approached it from the lens of women and how there is a way to healing. And I think she did a really good presentation on approaching that because 1 in 3 women are victims of sexual assault. And I think all three of the speakers today will do a good job at approaching PTSD, given that you all take a different lens. Jim said something that was immaculate, which was it's all about the integration. No matter what method you choose, Dr. Barnes approaches PTSD from the psychedelic realm, and Angela approaches PTSD from a resource perspective. So, Angela, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Angela Romero. I'm an Ayurveda and integrative holistic health practitioner. And I was passionate about speaking today because in my conversation with my client on Friday, she was talking about both of her daughters, and one of them was cutting and took a step back, and I realized that how many women do deal with PTSD at the hand of somebody who should actually be our caretaker and our protector. And I believe that most Americans, or most people, when you think of PTSD, as I did, I only ever think of veterans or the military service, and I'm grateful for them. And I don't believe that there's enough resources for them either. But I really wanted to focus on the woman and how many women are dealing with PTSD and living with it and kind of subsiding it and just pushing along through their days and not realizing something that they've seen or been affected to, a victim of, is actually, they're actually dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, and that it is valid thought, it is valid experience that they probably dealt with, and I see them and I'm here with them, and ways to, move forward.
So, Pete, when I think about today's summit, I want to start with a debrief. I want to ask, how do you guys think it went? And anyone can jump on this one.
First off, can I say, Dr. Barnes, it's so good to see you. I love the work that you do. And I don't have the other lady. Her name does not pop up. I also love the work that you do. We work on two sides of the same coin. So thank you what you do for women. It's really, and unfortunately, a lot of the trauma that women face is by the hands of men. Mm-hmm. And for all men, I deeply apologize for that. I think today went good. I really enjoyed it.
I do too. And by the way, all of your presentations, send me them over and I'll post them on the perspective pages. And for the audience, this roundtable will be available at DecentMed.org/PTSD. I want to ask this question to Dr. Barnes. As a naturopath and as a veteran, how do you think that us as a platform can make waves in going into the veteran community and helping with this issue? You touched extensively, because when you think about veterans, the main tool and source is the VA. And as you know, veterans have mixed opinions towards the VA. So how do you think that us as a platform and just the overall holistic community can make more strides with both the VA and helping with veterans?
I think what we do is we provide options. Care, like I talked about in my brief, each VA is its own individual unit. The VAs are not connected. The Seattle VA is not connected to the LA, is not connected to Chicago, and so forth. And so some people get better resources than others. But regardless of that, I think we can offer people options. Like, not everything, get my cat out of the way. Not everything is medication or talk therapy, and that's primarily what the VA centers offer. Mm-hmm. We offer traditional medicines that have been around for thousands of years, and it's just as valid to use those in healing as any of the other modalities. But I think a lot of people don't know that, and so educating people on what's available, what other choices are, and how to make that access affordable is a really valuable contribution to the veteran community.
Thank you for sharing. And my question is for anyone is, we talk a lot about integration. And it's interesting because when you think about AA or NA or SA or any of these organizations, well, really what it is integration, if you think about it, right? It's meeting with your peers and speaking about your experiences, which really helps you heal. So how important is integration? And, especially when it comes to psychedelic medicine, why do you think people miss that step in their healing journey?
I can talk a little first. Something that you mentioned right there, there's these associations that when people are dealing with things, they can go to a particular association that they feel associated with, right? Something that it resonates with them. And the point in that being is it's a community of people dealing with the same type of situation that you dealt with or have done with it previously, or they have a family member or somebody that has dealt with it. So they're very passionate and they put a lot of resources and assets for these people so they can be seen, heard, and appropriate ways to digest it, absorb it, or eliminate it, give it back to Mother Earth, and a way to move forward and feel fulfilled in life and be fulfilled in their own skin and in their own body, to have a sense of purpose and have a sense of energy and light and happiness again. So I think that those are super important, but the biggest point being the community, being seen, being heard, and knowing that we're safe, knowing that we're needed in this space. So that's my point.
That's a great point. Because again, when you talk about AA, for example, alcoholics feel more, or a better example is veterans. And Dr. Barnes can talk about this one. Veterans, when they're around other veterans, they understand each other, no matter what branch it is. You know, one thing that Dr. Barnes mentioned in her talk today is the idea that a lot of times with veterans, when they go to a restaurant, they'll sit with facing towards the exits. That's something that veterans will understand, but someone that's not a veteran, they might not understand that. Or that the language of veterans, typically it's a little bit more vulgar. They, they understand each other. And it's the community aspect, like you said, Angela, where they can understand one another, where someone that's not a veteran, especially if they have PTSD, they might not trust them.
Right. They could feel facade or fake, or what are your ulterior motives? What are your intentions with me? Because people that have imbalances, chemical imbalance, or they've dealt with trauma like PTSD, their state of mind could be compromised, and they're vulnerable, right? So having somebody see you in your space, and I think it's a man thing. My husband always sits facing the door, and I never understood why. And he explained to me one time when I sat facing the door, he said, "No, I need to sit there." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I felt safe because he's protecting me, as a woman should feel safe in her feminine energy. Yeah.
And, available at the Alternative Flight Plan podcast on YouTube, Dr. Barnes has spoken with multiple veterans about this subject when it comes to trauma. And Dr. Barnes, and I'll put the link in the chat, it's youtube.com/@Alternative Flight Plan podcast. Dr. Barnes, if you want to talk about what you and some other veterans have talked about, both on your podcast and just in general about this subject.
Yeah, it hasn't been all veterans, but it's been a lot. And one of the things I try to do when I do interview or sit with a veteran is remind people that just because I'm talking to a veteran doesn't mean that the information that we're sharing back and forth isn't applicable to anybody who's working through complex health issues, whether that be mental health or physical health. Mm-hmm. Some of the issues that we've talked about are specific to like women's health, like what happens to women's health when they've been through trauma. And I've talked to other acupuncturists who take the Chinese medicine lens, like I do, and how that can be useful in healing. To be honest and fair, though, a lot of what I talk about is psychedelic medicine, and that just happens to be because that's what I'm into, and the nonprofits that I work with are focused on that. But I can't stress enough that, like I talked about in my presentation, that's not for everybody. And I'd love for people to listen to my podcast and other podcasts that talk about other aspects of psychedelics, like why would you not want to do them? Or what are the potential risks? Because everybody talks about these things as a miracle cure, and they're not a miracle cure. They're a tool and a rather effective one, but one that has to be used very carefully. So we don't just talk about psychedelics. I don't just talk about psychedelics. I talk about what are the potential benefits, and we absolutely talk about the risks as well. But but my podcast isn't limited to that. Really, my goal with the podcast is to talk about the overlap between alternative and conventional, and that seems to be an even bigger player in dealing with mental health issues because of so many people taking mental health medications and getting stuck on things like opioids. And there's got to be an alternative approach to help people have other options that do not involve getting people hooked on medications. So it's about the overlap and how you can take advantage of both systems at the same time effectively.
I would like to ask a question, Dr. Barnes, to follow up. That was part of what I wanted to say when I was initially speaking. When I was speaking to my client the other day, we were talking about her daughters, and one of them was cutting. And one of the options that I had mentioned to her was combo or ayahuasca. And the reasons why I was explaining why those could be beneficial is because it's almost not an out of body, but it takes you to different levels, different dimensions, I guess, for lack of better words, to allow their body to see, feel, acknowledge, and maybe to move through it. And that's not something that I do, but if you don't mind possibly talking about that, because I would like to share this with them so they could understand how it could be utilized.
It does something with rigidity in the psychology, and it makes people more flexible and more open to alternative perspectives and facing their own traumatic experiences with less fear. I don't normally, ayahuasca is a really intense and potent medicine. I don't generally start there, although there have been people who have, and that's perfectly acceptable. But some of the gentler, I think MDMA and psilocybin are some of the most gentle medicines out there to do that type of work.
Oh,
but
so
absolutely, it puts you in a space psychologically that it makes it easier to look at the hard stuff. And there's this amazing side dish of self-compassion and self-forgiveness and self-love that is a critical component to healing the cycle of shame and guilt that a lot of people experience.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if you want to expand on that. So I don't see your name up here, but
Jim,
thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Barnes, I love what you say. Ironically, when I did my deepest healing from my sexual trauma from my youth, it was with ayahuasca. And now when people come to me and say, I want to do ayahuasca, I say, no, you don't. I say, you really don't. Because it is so intense. And out of the body is an understatement. Yeah. And I actually have a PowerPoint that I've created about my ayahuasca journey that I go through with people. And then if they still want to do it, I talk about the baseline things that you need to do to really prepare yourself for the intensity. And getting back to your original question, integration is so critical, because if we think about addiction, right, whether it's cutting, whether it's whatever is the result, whether it's PTSD of veterans because of what they went through, that addiction does not happen with a light switch. You all of a sudden just don't wake up and say, I feel so upset, I'm going to cut today. And Angela, I hope you're okay if I use that as an example, right? We stair step up because the first time we use our method or drug or whatever of choice, it numbs us from the pain we feel, and then we do more and more and more. And the power of integration, and I don't whether it's an AA, SLA, NA, it is the meetings where you're meeting on an ongoing basis and you're chipping away at those issues that have you want to go back and relapse. And when you're in community and when you're in discussion, that's when the integration is really powerful. Because if I were to simply integrate by sitting and having a conversation with my own mind, my mind is a dark place to go, and nothing, seldom does anything good happen in a dark neighborhood. But yet when I'm with other people and you're discussing like what happened, you can always relate. And I think that's where our growth is, and that's where we strengthen where we strengthen our fortitude to stay and really heal ourselves from the PTSD or the addiction.
So I have a question for Dr. Barnes, and available on decentmed.org/PTSD is our documentary that was released this time last year, which was on the use of combo and bufo for a gentleman that had PTSD as a veteran. But in your speech, you didn't touch on the benefits of combo and bufo. You spoke on ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA. What do you know about combo and bufo, and how do you feel about the use of those plant medicines?
I think you need to be very careful. One of the things I don't like about, I don't know what that sound is, because so MDMA is ecstasy, and it's a man-made thing, but its effects elicit an oxytocin response, which is unique among the so-called psychedelics. It's not a classic psychedelic like LSD or psilocybin or ayahuasca. They call it an empathogenic. Ketamine is called a dissociative. It's not a classic psychedelic either. Yes, that is correct. The party drug ecstasy, but it is a valid therapeutic agent that, when used appropriately, can be really, really effective for anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. I don't talk about combo and bufo a lot because you've got to be very careful using them. Like, combo is a peptide, and we talk, like, peptides are all the rage, but peptide is just a word for a type of protein, and there has been traditional use of combo, but it's not widespread, and I don't think so. I'm like half woo-woo and half clinical, and so the clinical part of me is still on the fence about using things that we really don't know enough about, and I don't know if enough people are trained in a traditional journeyman type of program or apprenticeship that they Angela's the same. I love it. Half woo and half clinical. I don't know if there are enough people who are using it appropriately. So I think it's being co-opted a little bit by people who don't know enough about what they're doing. They're getting a weekend course and putting a shingle out saying, "Hey, I do combo," and I think that's inappropriate, and that's a good way to hurt people and create a setback in the psychedelic movement. I don't talk about bufo a lot because it is, number one, I haven't done it, so I don't have personal experience in it. And number two, it is not necessarily a sustainable substance. So it is extracted from a toad. It's not plant medicine, it's animal medicine. And I think when we start doing extraction, and this gets into politics and social awareness and sustainability, if they're and colonization, if you will. So I think we have to be very careful about advertising and trying to use a medicine that isn't necessarily sustainable. And okay, so I'll just leave it at that. The other thing is that there is 5-MeO-DMT, which bufo is a very concentrated form of 5-MeO-DMT. 5-MeO-DMT is the active component, and there are vapes and things that you can do to use that, but you've got to be very careful. I think 5-MeO can be very destabilizing, and if you don't have an appropriate scaffolding set up to support somebody who goes into an experience and it completely blows away their previously known scaffolding, even if it was false or fake, if you know what I mean, or built on things that weren't necessarily true, and you don't give them a scaffolding on the other side, the results can be really, really negative. Yeah, I'll just say it like that. It can be very, very negative. So you've got to be very careful about the preparation for that sort of thing, and ensuring that on the other side of doing such a mind-blowing experience, I've seen it done dozens of times. I've never done it myself, but I've watched it happen, and I see what people experience in these. You have to have something on the other side, a stable connection where you're working with somebody over time, you're checking in with them either daily or weekly, and you're supporting them in other ways to make sure that what you do with such an intense substance doesn't actually make them way worse. So I don't generally talk about them. I generally talk about the ones that are being studied and the ones that are most well known. Ibogaine is on the center stage, psilocybin on the center stage, ayahuasca, most everybody has heard about the ayahuasca and all the vomiting and all the things. And then MDMA has a cultural context with ecstasy. So that's generally why I orient my talks towards those, and not, there are so many other, like we haven't even talked about things like Jimson weed and some of the Chinese medicine nootropics and psychedelic substances are out there. Every culture has one, and generally every culture has many. Some of them are decidedly unsafe. Some of them just aren't marketable enough to be mainstream. So that's a big topic. And the reason why I don't talk about it is because the other ones are more accessible. We have more of a safety or known safety profile or safety window, and people can access them.
That's a great point. And Jim put it very eloquently today as well, is that if you're doing these substances to mellow out or escape, it's very different. You know, a lot of people, again, use MDMA to go to the club, or they'll, take mushrooms or cannabis for the mellow or the escape. And that's why the integration is so important. And just to cycle away from psychedelics, because there's a lot of people that might be religious, they might be afraid of psychedelics, but they have the same trauma that someone would. The reason why, and if Dr. Barnes wants to touch on this, or Jim or Angela, I have found that for veterans, the psychedelic works well is because a lot of veterans consume alcohol, and a lot of veterans have an experience that is very extreme. And that's not to say that other experiences aren't, but that's just what I found. But let's talk a little bit about some other methods outside of the psychedelic realm. And again, I just want to state that without the integration, you're just mellowing out. And that is the most important part. So if anybody wants to jump in and touch on some other methods for PTSD outside of the psychedelic realm.
Angela, go ahead.
Well, a couple things that I do is I help my clients with is, of course, through pranayamas or breath work, through sitting with self meditation, through journaling, through grounding, releasing, but Reiki and sound bath, and also the community, being in a safe space with others that can see you, so you can be seen, be heard. And sometimes those two things alone, being seen, being heard, and understood, is enough for us to get the words out, to release it, and to have the comfort knowing that we're safe to move forward. And with those certain steps, of course, it's not night and day. And that's unlike Western medicine. Of course, when we're doing holistic integrative practices, it takes time. And a lot of times it becomes a way of life for the rest of your life, but you have an elevated life stature versus versus just sedating it.
Jim.
Yeah, I've done breath work mostly in addiction recovery centers for people who are less than 30 days clean, for over 30,000 people. And I think breath work is almost as powerful as psychedelics, not only when it's in the right context, but when you also have the integration after it. And then like in the recovery centers, I had one recovery center that they did all their tapping and they did all their alternative stuff. 100% of the people had all of that done before I showed up on Tuesday night for the breathwork session. So I showed up in this room where these people were so on the edge. And then we did a very intense breathwork, and it was miracles. It was really seeing miracles happen. And it's not that I created it, I just opened the space and they stepped into it. Because if you do have hesitations around psychedelics, like Angela said, there are other modalities that can work just as effectively. It's fun. Like both of you, I'm a little woo-woo and also a little on the I mostly work in companies, and you just can't go in and be like, hey dude, let's do some mushrooms and heal the management staff. But after you work with them a while, you, depending upon the culture, you have the opportunity. And there are many different ways, especially with trauma, to chart the course where people have a healing difference.
And to Jim's point, I think all three of you guys' point about the woo-woo, I think what we need in medicine today, and I wouldn't necessarily call it woo-woo, but we need a intersection between holistic medicine and traditional medicine. As Dr. Barnes brought up, a lot of these modalities have been around for a lot longer than traditional medicine has been.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at Ayurveda, it's been around for 8,000 plus years. Acupuncture has been around for 5,000 years. The use of psychedelic medicine has been around since pre the 1900s. But again, if we get into the politics side of it, since the 1900s, the idea of holistic medicine has been labeled as woo-woo and seen as something that is not to be touched. And Angela put a great point, and that is what our purpose is. And what we have become and what we started as a platform that posts provider studies on a decentralized network called Noster, as well as our platform, to validate the effectiveness of holistic medicine. Dr. Barnes has a study on our platform about how affecting trauma can help with chronic disease like pyrrole disorder, which is a study that she posted on the platform. We have other studies that are in the works right now in how holistic medicine addresses some of these chronic diseases. And when it comes to PTSD and the use of psychedelics, I highly encourage Dr. Barnes, as you get more studies, to send them to me so we can post it on the platform as well. Because to your point, yes, it is about the money. But I think what COVID did, and hopefully YouTube, you don't get mad at me for this, but what the pandemic did is pushed people towards looking at alternatives. They said, well, wait a minute. There needs to be an alternative to what we're doing. And that is why over the course of the last 6 years, we've seen more people into alternative medicine. We've seen things like psychedelic medicine in states like where Dr. Barnes is in Washington start to legalize some of these psychedelics, because I think we are moving towards a world in which you need to have both. Like Jim said, obviously there is a long road ahead, and we can't lead with the deepest elements of psychedelic medicine in penetrating the corporate world, penetrating a lot of the boomers and other entities that don't believe in this world. But I think that we're getting there. And if anybody wants to touch on this one.
I mean, I might make a quick comment. One has to be very careful with psychedelic medicine.
That's true.
Because as providers, we are opening Pandora's box, and we need to understand the trauma that they've gone through, understand them before we really use that psychedelic medicine. Because I have seen people go in and literally say, oh yeah, I can, let's do a ceremony tomorrow. Right. Yeah. And I am doing a ceremony tomorrow, but I've been working with this person for 2.5 months. I finally have an understanding of their deep trauma and where they are. And now is the first time I actually feel safe doing a psychedelic healing ceremony with them, because I understand what's going to happen when we open Pandora's box.
I think there's a lot of charlatans in this world, in this game, because there is a lot of money in retreats and psychedelic medicine. And I think that's why we need more studies. And I think Jim is completely right. We need more of the integration at the beginning and the integration at the end. And that's what I really liked about that documentary that we did last year, was the first couple days was them getting to know Mir, and that was the name of the gentleman, them getting to know him, really understanding his trauma, understanding who he is, explaining how the process is going to work in depth, and breaking it down to him, starting slow. And this is a question for you guys. Do you know about somatic exercise, and what's your thoughts on that? Because that was the first day. It wasn't any psychedelic medicine. It was actually him doing him doing somatic therapy. And Dr. Barnes touched on this in her speech today, which is that when you say the idea of the body keeps the score, it's not that the body is keeping record, it's stored in those neural pathways. And that's why there is theories that as you do these somatic exercises, you can actually use the breath work to breathe out the pain. And I noticed as even I was doing it, that, for example, I was sitting on my feet, and you would think that my calves would be very much in pain, but it was actually my back. And if people in Dr. Barnes, you probably know about this, those are trauma centers where every bit of the pain was actually in my lower back. It wasn't at all in my feet. So Dr. Barnes or Angela or Jim, if you want to touch on that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked all about neurosomatic intelligence, NSI, which is all about somatic-based exercises. And I do want to be clear that although I talk about psychedelics, and a lot of my podcast is about that, and I do work with veterans in that space, that is not usually my first going in. There are lots of other options for people to discover and unpack before they get to psychedelic medicine. And when it's time and when they're ready, then you open the door to that. Additionally, the way it's set up in Oregon and Colorado, the two states where it is actually legal to do psilocybin, that it's very regulated, and it is designed to be as safe as possible. So there aren't necessarily charlatans or bad actors in those areas, provided that the people that are doing the medicine are licensed with the state, if that makes sense. Now, if you're using an underground practitioner, that's different. And there are arguments against regulation as well. Like this is a whole nother thing. But psychedelic medicine was only a small part of my presentation today, and I spent most of the time on things like naturopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, nutrition, sleep medicine, using technology like the alpha stim or the vagus nerve stimulator, trying all those things first before you get to a point where like nothing else is working. I think I might want to try mushrooms.
And I think she did a really good job with that, because breaking down the different ways. I mean, like Jim put, she has a whole presentation on, don't just run to ayahuasca because you heard that it works for people. Try other things first. But I do have a question for you guys. And Jim did touch on this in his speech today. Obviously, there's a lot of people that know they have it, right? Because just maybe immediately. But maybe there's people that try to hide it away, or, you know, they go through life and they have PTSD and they're just saying, well, I can just deal with it. Jim, this question is for you. How do you approach those people safely to help them move forward and expedite that healing process? Because like you put, you pushed through for 15 years, and it was warning signs like, I want to be alone, or I want to continually leave, that you might not have thought that was PTSD, but then it was like, no, I need to heal this.
So the interesting part about my life is that by the age of 13, I had been sexually abused by both men and women. When I was 9, it was a 16-year-old girl. When I was 12, I was left with a pedophile for 3 weeks when my parents went to Europe. And it was pretty severe trauma. I still got through college, but after college, every job that I had, I excelled at. But the thing is about every 3 years, I was literally crawling out of my skin, and I had to geographically move. And after 4 moves, I began to see that I was the common denominator with all of the problems in my life. And that's when my journey, my healing journey began, which did not include any psychedelics for another 15 years, 10 years, 15 years. But it took me about 10, 12 years to heal, which is perfect for me, but it's not perfect for any of my clients. When I first meet somebody, I mean, I did it in a group this morning, I give a more sanitized version of that, but then I just ask, is there something about you that you would like to explore, that together we can explore in a safe container so that you can understand the impact of unprocessed trauma on your life today? And since I primarily work with men, you have to go about it far different, because men are culturally, we are the providers. And I'm just speaking at a cultural level. We are taught from a very young age, boys don't cry, toughen it up. We are taught to bury our emotions. And yet I have an all men's group. And the beautiful thing is when men actually open up to their emotions, they can be authentic and they can say things in a space of no judgment, of pure acceptance. That's when the healing work begins. But I can only speak to men. You'll have to talk to Kristen or Angela about, because women tend to be far more open about the abuse that happened. As men, we tend to hide it more. I hid it for a long time. And even after I healed myself, it wasn't until I started doing workshops in addiction recovery centers, it wasn't until after the ayahuasca that I was comfortable talking about my sexual abuse in front of a room.
And to your point, Jim. Oh,
go ahead. First of all, Jim, I'd like to say I'm glad that you were able to move and speak and openly. I think there's a shame that comes along with that. And yeah, men are they are taught to be silenced and put it away. Whereas I believe that when you can recognize that, and I don't want to use the words honor it, but acknowledge it and move through it and find a way to move past, you can really be in your masculine to then be the caretaker and the protector, to allow the woman to be in her feminine, which is then that's when things can really, come to fruition. But I do see that a lot is with men, boys too. Yeah, be quiet, and also generational trauma. So I wanted to say thank you for breaking that as well, and not doing that. Continuing the trauma that happened to you and putting it onto others and continuing this pattern. I've seen that through, hundreds of years as well. It just continues to go on. So to be able to, and I see that in our timeline right now, there's a lot of generational trauma breakers that are happening, light workers that are allowing others to break these ties and not have it continue on. So I think it has to work for men and women. I mostly speak to women because that's who I work with and who I help. But I know it has to come from both sides for sure.
and as a young man, well, middle-aged at 30, I have seen that both Gen Z and Gen Alpha, their biggest role models say things like depression doesn't exist, like you just said, toughen up. So I think now more than ever before, voices like Jim's and what Jim is doing is very important for young men because, and obviously I can't speak for older generations, but I think what's happened in the last 15 years for young men, it's very impactful. I mean, what the pandemic did for young people, where a lot of them couldn't go to prom, some of them couldn't really experience other people because of now we're in this tech generation, Zoom school. So I think that voices like that is very impactful for this generation, my generation, and I'm on the tail end of millennial. I think millennial and up, 30 and up people, I think they are less influenced by the internet. So it's a little different where they can express themselves and maybe see healing faster in that way but again, like Jim said, even the older generations, they grew up in a different way where it was stuff it down. It was toughen up, stuff it down. So even when you look at the younger generation of 30 and younger, or 30 to 60 or 30 to 80, both generations have this stigma of toughen up, buttercup, don't cry, all these things. And I think, like we went over earlier, it really comes down to getting in community in that group. I think there isn't enough community among men, whether that's 30 younger, that really only have, Discord or video games, but it's not anything where they're really in person or they're really getting to know each other on a deeper level than just jokes and pop culture. And I think that's why what Jim is doing is very impactful. And Jim, if you want to touch on kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, we need to heal at the end of the day. I mean, I've had a number of young clients. I even was, for a short time, had a Gen Z client who at 27 had never worked. And he was just lost. And yet there needs to be more male role models come forward. And these need to be the authentic male role models. We don't need tough guys. We need men who can express their emotions and show their hearts. I had a meeting with a gentleman this week and he started crying. And I'm like, thank you. That's beautiful. Because the first thing he did was he attempted to hide himself. And I'm like, dude, let the tears flow. Like, how healthy that you can release all that pent up emotion in tears. That is beautiful. That is how it should be. And the whatever is the 30 to 50, that is the generation that is going to really assist the Gen Z and the Gen A's to really step into their authentic power.
Yes, millennials.
The millennials. I'd welcome some input from our other co-panelists, the ladies also.
Yeah.
Like, what do you hear, not only for men, but for women too?
Dr. Barnes?
Sorry, I got muted along the way there. I guess I don't understand the question. Are we referring to generational trauma, or are we just referring to the cultural stigmas that are differing from generation to generation?
I think it's the stigma, because the point I made is, I think across culture or across generation, there really is the same stigma, just wrapped up in a different way. If not, Jim, you have a better way to put that.
I think it's a little of both. I think we are the ones that are going to lead the way to healing. We need to be the example. And maybe I'm wrong to label the generations. Maybe we just need to be the example for all of the generations for healing, for men, for women, for gay, lesbian, transgender. Like, we need to be the space that they can heal, and that there is, we break all of that old conditioning, and we create a space of authenticity in ourselves. I don't know if I'm saying that proper, but
Angela, did you have something?
I was just thinking, 100%. I agree with you, Jim. And my brain went to being open, being willing, understanding that perhaps we maybe everyday Americans, everyday people are potentially walking around with PTSD, acknowledging that, but also being open to understanding others that are probably walking around with it. And that's where we have a disconnect in today, right now, society, the separation. And that separation, I think, is causing, in general, a lot of PTSD of society wise, because it's hard. People don't understand why people can't understand them. And just we all want that connection. We all want to be seen and heard. But when there's such a disconnection, you feel like I have to be part of this party because I associate with them or that. But that's completely wrong. We're all humans. We're all here breathing, just a human experience on earth. And when people can start to see that more as a commonality, that's when I think as society will start to heal and whole, and it'll slowly mitigate.
I would agree with that. My next question for the group is, how do you think over the next 20 years we can change the way people look at PTSD as holistic providers?
I think we need to understand the roots. I think you need to understand, once you understand the roots of it, because PTSD, and this is just my opinion, and Dr. Barnes may have a little bit different one, and I would totally respect that. If you understand the roots of your own trauma and drama, and then you apply that to the life situations that happen, especially for the military, because Dr. Barnes, you can speak on this, but in my eyes, basic training teaches it deconditions you as a human, and you just follow orders. But when people go out of the military, they don't unprogram that. And I think that's where partially some of the issues come from. And I got to be careful. I'm on thin ice, especially with a veteran here.
I would like to go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to jump on that too, because not being in the military myself, but both of my grandfathers were. My husband was not. My boys, I have 2 growing boys, and I think that we see this man. My daughter and I went to the donut shop, and there's a gentleman in there, and he is a veteran, and he's also, there was something else, and I said, based off of those 2 things alone, you should not. He's homeless, and he holds up a sign, and he says he makes more money doing that. That's beside the point, but as a government, as a society, I'm speaking about veterans, my own personal perspective as well. It makes me very emotional and really frustrated and angry, to a point that we don't give enough credit, enough honor, enough thanks, enough gratitude to the men and women. Because when you show up for, again, it's my perspective, but when they show up for the boot camp, they've essentially given their soul to the land of which we live in, to the United States of America. And their soul is no longer their own soul to do rightfully what they choose. It's what somebody else tells you. And Jim, to your point, when they come out from, maybe they saw battle, maybe they didn't, but when they go back to society, they're used to someone telling them, you do this, you do that. But in my life, I'm the decider. I decide what I do and don't do, and who I'm associated with and not. But when they come back to society, those thoughts of creating and what they've experienced and how they've been treated, you're right. There should be an exit, a way. It's disgusting. I am disgusted at all of it. It makes me so sad.
And a quick note before Dr. Barnes jumps in, the Cherokee medicine man that I worked with, I don't know if you know, when a Cherokee comes out of the military, they take him through a program and they basically deprogram him before he comes back into society. He told me that the Cherokee soldiers do not experience PTSD because of that.
My thoughts are in alignment with that. There is no ceremony. There's no, we have some stuff on paper. We call it TAPS, the Transition Assistance Program, but everybody knows that TAPS is kind of a joke. They tell you basically, you need to dress like the other civilians around you. You need to talk like the other civilians around you if you reassimilate into the civilian world. But there's no acknowledgement of, even if you have a retirement ceremony in a party, it's not the same as the way traditional warriors were welcomed back into the civilian community as citizens. So I don't know that that's going to change anytime soon. Our military is too big, and it's not decentralized enough in terms of the support that veterans get at home. Like, I've never been part of the VFW or the AMVETS or any of those places. Maybe I should have, but if we had a better way to welcome service members back into their community in a way that and there's a number of different, I've read a lot about this. Oh my gosh, I could talk about this forever. Let me just say that I just think our system is too big and our culture is not designed that way. And it's going to take something much greater as far as a shift before we see that happen. I think that's why so many veterans are really, really passionate about connecting and reaching other veterans, because we do understand. And if we have successfully transitioned and eased that from one identity to another, or integrated our military identity into our current civilian identity, if we've done that successfully and we can share that, then we absolutely should. And I think it's one of the reasons I work with veterans, because it's my duty to help get them through what I've been through. So, and that's why so many veterans organizations are helping our veteran led. So I hear you, Angela. It's frustrating for me too. Like, when I got out, it was just boom. One day I'm doing all the things, and the next day I'm sitting at home drinking a beer, watching Netflix. Like, that's psychological whiplash on a lot of levels.
It's kind of like when
they doctor.
Yeah, it's like when men are in the jail, in prison for a long time, and they come out of prison. You just walk out, and you have to get back to like everyday life, and everyday people don't know what you've seen, heard, or been through, or anything, because they're so consumed with themselves. And but I have a question for you, Dr. Barnes. I have a friend whose husband passed from drug abuse. He was in the military, and he got on meds, and it ended up taking his life, unfortunately. And she was working with other people to try to help them in this situation, but eventually she paused that road because it was really hard on her. So I question veterans helping veterans. Is it, you have to protect yourself, right? Your own energy. Like, is it hard for some people to experience and be around people to pull it back in?
Yeah, and I think that's the importance of doing your own work. Like, I would not be able to do the work that I do today without having done the work that I've done in the past. And that started, I probably started self-improvement, if you will, back in the late 90s or the early 2000s, in my late 20s, early 30s. So because you have to be able to sit with somebody who's having a really deeply intense experience and not get sucked into it. It's like emotional contagion almost. I have to be able to sit, and it's no different for you, Jim, as a counselor, and you, Angela, as an Ayurvedic practitioner. You've got to be able to be almost like a marble statue, if you will. You're not rigid, but at the same time, you cannot absorb that. And I think a lot of people who go into helping veterans are doing it from the absolute right place, like their heart and their soul is in it, but they're too in it and they're absorbing too much. And so there's got to be that way to be in it without having it affect your Yeah.
I mean, that's so brilliant what you're speaking to, because I meet so many people that are empaths and they don't know they're empaths. And so much, their issues are driven because as empaths, we want to take on the energy of others. And if I were to take on either one of your energetic issues, that core spirit inside of me doesn't know how to process it because it's not mine. Now there's a dysregulation there's an energetic dysregulation inside of me, which is going to have me be funkadelic, for lack of a better word, when I'm with it. And I know one of the things around like the ceremony tomorrow, I will have my own boundaries up because I know how to put the boundaries up. So because the gentleman that's going through this psychedelic experience, he is this super sensitive empath who's been an empath his whole life, and he's taken on all this stuff around him. I mean, he can't even drive down the road without picking up the road rage from another car. And then he wonders why he has anger issues. And it's like, I'm like, and he finally believed me. He's like this energetic stuff is crap. Like in our first things. And now he's like, I was driving down the road and I could feel the energy of the person next to me. And I'm like, but we can't heal you until you are off the drug you're on right now. And he is 80% off of it. But once he gets off of it, then we can start doing the real work. But I really think that so many of the people who want to help, they have these empathic gifts, and they don't teach you about empathy in school. And even a lot of, like, I'm a theta healer. As a theta healer, we really didn't even talk about empathy and the empathic gifts that spiritual beings in a human form have.
Thank you so much for that, Jim. At DecentMed, we are dedicated to addressing chronic disease with holistic medicine. All types of chronic diseases. This summit, we featured some great providers, and you can find them. You can find Dr. Barnes at decentmed.org/naturopathy. You can find Angela Romero at decentmed.org/Ayurveda. And you can find Jim Paconin at decentmed.org/trauma. I highly encourage you to watch our latest documentary, our documentary from last year on decentmed.org/PTSD, as well as the replay at decentmed.org/PTSD. And you can catch the entire summit on More Active at telehealth.decentmed.org. Thank you to all of our great speakers. And it was a pleasure. Join us for our next summit next month. It will be on women's health and menopause. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.